Hi everyone, welcome to Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston, beside me is...
Nathan Smith.
And welcome to another episode of QQ. Right now we are about to discuss Kingsman, the Secret Service. They're knights, it's not the Night Secret Service.
They do have knights' names, that's for sure. Merlin
Yes.
and yeah.
So on and so forth. If you're not sure where you are right now, this is about to be a discussion full of spoilers where we kind of break down different story elements, so on and so forth. So if you haven't seen the movie, pause it now. Go see it or listen to our review to see if you want to, and then join us for this discussion. Very quick recap, if you haven't left yet. Basically, for me, gave it a B minus. Nathan gave it a B, and the short of it, it was a good action film. Did some elements well, good acting, well shot, but didn't do anything risky or sort of didn't push the envelope, especially in like sort of a story sense. Why don't we go right to the beginning?
Yeah. So let's just recap a bit here. So this is Matthew Vaughn's new movie. Once again, he's collaborating with kick-ass writer Mark Miller. So I could be wrong, but I think this is, as with the case of Kick-Ass, I don't even think the graphic novel came out by the time the movie came out, which is a little weird, and I think that might be the case again for this movie. So it's kind of like one of those things where there aren't really fans of the graphic novel because it isn't out. So it's just kind of like they're just putting it out there. They're an interesting pairing. It's very, I always go to the word pulpy. It's very pulpy material, very violent, very fast-paced, and, kind of a little out there. Like, there's some interesting ideas. So this one, this is a spy movie, more or less. It's paying homage to those 60s, 70s James Bond spy movies. The sort of ridiculous nature of them, the villain with the hidden layer and all this weird kind of nonsense.
And the villain with the blade legs.
Yes, the bladed legs, yeah. It definitely, it's not afraid of going there. I guess, let's just start right from the beginning. So, we're introduced to Taron Egerton, and he's the son of a spy. He quickly gets recruited into the Kingsman. And, I really like this sort of aspect of the movie where we see Taron Egerton playing his character, Eggsy is his nickname, which was very hard to understand with their accents. I did not know what they were saying for a while. But I liked seeing him kind of in his, living with his, I guess his mom's a prostitute, and he's living this kind of really shitty life, I'll just say. Like, it's not...
Was she a prostitute?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Like, it seemed like that.
I just thought she was down on her luck. But...
No, I'm pretty sure, like, and, she's associated with some kind of a gang that's going on there. So he's just kind of living this not great life.
I was pretty sure that his stepfather was basically the head of a gang, but maybe I just wasn't watching the same beginning of viewer.
Well, I don't think it's a stepfather. They're just... But yeah, that is the gang I'm talking about.
Sorry, not stepfather. The person that his mother was dating. He's definitely not a stepfather.
Well, okay, maybe she isn't a prostitute, but I certainly got the impression that they treated her like one.
Yeah.
So there's that. Yeah, he's basically living a pretty poor life. And then he gets this opportunity to join this very secretive, spy group, which conducts top secret missions and has fancy gadgets like, exploding lighters and, all the cool things from back in those old cheesy James Bond movies, which they've completely abandoned in the new ones. So, it's, I think it's a great opening because we immediately sympathize with Eggsy, and I think Taron Egerton does a great job both in this aspect and once he becomes a member of the Kingsman. Like, he does a great job in all these roles. Like, he's kind of a cocky teenager. Oh, well, I'm pretty sure he's still a teenager. But yeah, he's not the nicest person, and then he has to transform into a gentleman, as Colin Firth puts it. And it's, he always reminds him, it's not where you start, it's how you choose to behave. So, I really like this pairing of these two characters. Colin Firth is a great addition to this movie. I think he's badass and awesome throughout this whole movie, and it's not something you normally see him doing. Like, they play on that sort of stereotype of him being a very gentleman Englishman, wearing
a little bit fragile.
Yeah, but then when he needs to, he just starts drop kicking people. Like, it's pretty amazing. So yeah, go into it a bit.
Nathan and I have been doing a few of these podcasts, and we're starting to realize that I have a bit of a thing for fonts. And
Oh God, you're actually gonna bring this up.
I for what it's worth, as soon as they had like the two soldiers listening to the boombox, and all of a sudden this plane comes through and like explodes inside of the building, and then the font falls out of the building and rolls up, and then comes up with this like cheesy sort of popping up with like, hi, like, Kingsman or a film by. It was just, if I didn't know what kind of film I was seeing, I definitely knew then.
I don't think you did know what movie you were seeing. You didn't know that the villain's lackey had bladed legs when we went into the theater.
People should know, like, I try my best to not watch trailers. I literally go in, and I go, okay, who directed it and who's in it, if I need that. Usually I just go see a film because Nathan's like, let's go see it. I'm like, okay, great. And so, I guess because part of it is just I want to see a film with the least amount of information as possible, and sort of experience it as best as the director has wanted me to. So yeah, I didn't realize I was going to see a film that literally had like a lackey that had, it's not even a lackey, it's just the antagonist's like bodyguard.
Lackey.
I'm trying, anyways, with the blade legs, and like slicing people in half and stuff. It was just totally ridiculous.
It's a completely over the top movie. I mean,
yeah, and actually that's one thing I wanted to talk on about. It's considering that one of the main antagonists has blades for legs. I actually thought that element was probably one of the better handled elements, or it's one of the understated ones. Like,
you'd think that's where it would jump the shark, but it's not.
Not even close.
No.
And I sort of want to give him kudos for that. I mean, he totally like just goes off his rocker near the end. But I thought it was well done, and because I'm sure it's not easy to sort of find that sort of thing. Because I guess it's sort of like an experience when we saw the film. As soon as Sam Jack came on screen and he started talking, people started giggling because of his accent and like, it's funny and all that sort of stuff. But the bodyguard comes on before, and the audience didn't laugh or go like, what the hell or whatever when they saw the legs. And I thought, so that's pretty cool, because that was one of the first moments of the film. Shortly after one of Colin Firth's sort of trainees jumps on and like protects everyone else. The very next scene is when this professor is kidnapped, and
none other than Mark Hamill.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. Which apparently got a bit of a shaking of the finger, but whatever.
Luke Skywalker has not aged well.
Yes, and so I thought that was well executed. Anyways, going through further along in the film, for whatever reason, me personally, I've always really enjoyed the moments where like those sequences in films where it's like usually just a little bit after the first act, where you see the character starting to unlock their skills or go through training and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know why, I've always really enjoyed those elements in films. And I thought this one started off really well. And basically, if you guys can't remember, they come into this, like all of the knights have to pick a sort of trainee to take the place of Lancelot, who is killed by the blade leg. And so they get these 12 much younger looking people than the soldiers that we saw at the beginning, who were also going through training. And the very first thing that happens is like, okay, you have to sign this little sheet of paper that's, it's your body bag, just to, symbolize that you know the risks. And all these characters are basically saying like, oh, don't worry, it's a scare tactic and everything. And when they wake up and the water's filling the room, it's really interesting because, okay, sure, Iggy finds out where the mirror is and breaks it and all that sort of stuff. But then they have that dead body. And you're like, okay, because normally you don't think they would actually kill off the character. And in fact, one of the other members that are going through this job application, as they say, or job interview, says, they're not going to kill anyone. And so the film sort of does a really good job of creating that sense of uncertainty, like they will actually go there and actually decide to kill off some of these characters, and so they create this legitimate sense of stakes.
I mean, it's a long time before you realize she actually isn't dead when they reveal that. I mean, so you go through most of this movie thinking that, like, it's make or break. Like, you're either going to do this or you might die.
But for me, and like, so that, it's really cool. Like, okay, they can actually die. There's legitimate stakes. You know, when they get, water fills the room, there's a possibility that they can drown. Because no one wants to watch a film where they know that the characters are not at risk, whether it be physically or emotionally, and more often not, it's emotionally in films, but in this one it's physically, that being an action film. But the problem is with so many of the job interview sort of tests, someone just lies about something. And for me, like after the second one, or even like the first one, I just started to realize that for all the tests that they're doing, people are just... They're like the person that's interviewing them in this sort of extended process just lies about something, and so I knew that there wasn't always a risk. When they're jumping from the airplane, I knew that everyone, or at least I could make a very educated guess that everyone had a parachute.
Well, I mean, I think what bothers me more than that, like, I understand what you're saying with that, because, I was like, they probably all have parachutes, and it's just a loyalty test, but I think what bothers me more than that is, like, what are some of those tests supposed to do? Like, how does falling out of an airplane and landing on a mark, how does that really make you a Kingsman? That doesn't really do much, right? Like, it doesn't really, it doesn't feed into the actual training that they need to do what they do in the movie, to run around and shoot people with deadly accuracy and...
Well, I mean, I have slightly less issue on, like, the whole idea, like, you need to know how to parachute and all sort of stuff, and they do try and bring it back with, oh no, I forget her name, the other character.
Oh, I don't know her name either.
Oh man. But anyways, they bring that back with the character who's... They signify that she's afraid of heights.
She becomes a new Lancelot.
Yeah, so Lancelot. That's why I wanted to call her that, but I couldn't remember her name beforehand. But anyways, the person who becomes Lancelot, they sort of play on that, but they don't really do anything with it. But my sort of concern is, like, after they realize that, like, okay, I actually had a parachute, and he didn't even bother actually, like, pulling it. Like, if I'm falling out of the sky, and I know that I'm gonna die, or if I'm holding on to someone, I'm at least gonna take a chance and pull my cord just to make sure there's nothing in there. But the character never does. And then...
To be fair, though, if he pulled it, then he would have failed the test. Because he would be too high.
But, like, no, because there's so many people that actually... pull the cord and still make it... Oh, there's one other person that pulls the cord before them and makes it into the little mark on the ground, right? So
but there were several people before that also failed because they pulled it too early.
Well, all I'm saying is that he could still theoretically pull it, right? He did. Like, all he had to do was, like, okay, she's got a parachute. Okay, I'm gonna pull mine. Right?
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I thought his plan was pretty sound, though. Like, I like how he wanted everyone to pair up. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then, one of the guys panicked and it all kind of went to shit because there was an odd number, so... Yeah. But yeah, I mean...
Like, that was cool, but my problem is that I don't, like, have characters that are written to basically not test something like that, and maybe it's just me. But, like, even with, like, the very end... I liked it, the final test, where they say basically, like, they hand them a gun and be like, okay, shoot your dog. I really thought that was...
His poor pug.
Yeah, his poor pug, indeed. I thought it was well constructed, and I thought it was a really neat sort of idea or test. Basically saying, how far are you willing to trust us? Are you willing to shoot a dog that you've had for, however long they've been doing this interview process?
And the interesting thing is, I actually wasn't sure where they were going to go with that.
Yeah.
I was actually a little uneasy. I'm like... I didn't imagine it would show a close-up of him blasting his pug in the face with a pistol, but at the same time, the movie kind of just goes there more often than not, so I wasn't actually sure where they would draw the line.
Yeah, and it's... Yeah, I was not as certain as I was with the parachute, but, like, after them being tied to the train... and you realize that it's basically a test and that they were just seeing, would they give up to Kingsman even if it meant death? Like, after that point, I'm like, okay, look, fucking everything is a test at this point. They do have the little sly writing in there when it's just the two left. The one actually becomes Lancelot and Iggy. Eggsy, whatever, that guy. And it's like, okay, no more safety nets. Okay, sure, they had that slightly sly line, but the very next test was the pug. And I had a sneaking suspicion it was blank. And if I knew I was going to fail the test anyways, I just shoot somewhere, right? And then at least I'd know myself that it was a blank.
Well, yeah, I mean, I criticize that too, where it's like, I always hate in movies when people like this who are professionally trained with weapons don't check their weapon. Like, if someone handed me a gun and said, shoot your dog, the first thing I would do is check to see if the gun is loaded with a real bullet.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a way they could have circumvented that, and it is just, maybe it's not the type of movie where you're supposed to ask those kind of questions, but it does kind of bother me a bit. Something I want to bring up, this isn't really so much of like a mistake the movie made, but a setup that I thought was going to be interesting is the test that the three of them had to seduce that one woman.
Yeah.
Including the woman who becomes Lancelot, we should really look up her name, but how they all have to seduce this one woman, and I was like, wow, that's a really clever and actually I think relevant test, because that suave nature of these characters is important, I think. And so something that disappointed me is they kind of just set this up and then break away from it. And
I was really disappointed too.
I was like, I legitimately wanted to see these three characters try to like win over this random woman. And maybe there could have been something interesting in there, like she was planted or, whatever. But, like, I thought there were a lot of interesting opportunities, and instead it went for that false sense of danger. And it's like, oh, now they're tied to a train track, and you're like, I know it's not real.
Yeah, and and that's the problem. It's like and that's, I think, my biggest issue with this film, is that I thought it could have had a really interesting sense of legitimate danger, but it's just time and time again, when it was sort of, it was time to put up or shut up, is always just fake or pretend or lies or whatever. And I just wish they came up with something more clever than that. And not only that, but I wish the characters start to clue in, because like if they're supposed to be as smart as they are supposed to be, to not sort of clue in that like every time they do something of legitimate fear or something that's scary, that's been fake. I much prefer my characters to be smarter than me. And then the instant that I feel like the characters are being written or are told to basically say something for the sake of the story, I see that as a fault of the script, right?
Let's move away from the training segment for a bit here. There's a lot going on in this movie. So another aspect that's going on while this training is Colin Firth is quickly zeroing in on Samuel L. Jackson having some kind of devious plan. So there's this weird plan that Samuel L. Jackson has set up to give free phone service to anyone, and
which I also have a problem with, but
that was a little weird, but it's immediately, we're just like, well, this is obviously very bad. We see in the beginning, the chip that's planted behind poor Luke Skywalker's head that makes his head explode. So something very badly is going to go on with these with his free phone service program. There's a lot of action scenes still throughout. There's that great scene, I thought it was awesome, where Colin Firth is beating the hell out of people in the bar, beating the gangsters. And this was just great. Like, I think it's really well filmed, it's really slick, and it's the first time I just love how he behaves with his glass of Guinness, just like, please leave me alone just until I finish this glass of Guinness. I've had a bad day. And then, they press him a bit, and, he pulls out the umbrella and just starts beating the hell out of people. I thought this was great, and it kind of brings... that's like the first scene where you really... the main character is exposed to, like, what he could possibly be. So you get to see, like, his desire to transform. They never really explain how he has such a crazy natural ability, but that's fine. He just kind of quickly picks on, I guess. But yeah, I think the action scenes throughout this movie are very well done. They're really interesting, and the church scene, that's the one that like a lot of people are talking about, because like that's just kind of we talk about how this movie goes there. It pretty well went there and left the parking lot in this scene. We're in a church and we have Colin Firth dressed as a perfectly fine Englishman, gentleman type guy, and then he just starts killing everyone. I mean, he kills that's the first person he kills is an old lady.
Yeah.
And then he just starts stabbing people with crosses and knives and all sorts of vicious tools.
The one thing I will say is, like, I think they try to heavily imply that it was the Westboro Church, like that
Yes.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
where so they try and like demonize these people.
It is. They're
before
like
they do that.
extremists. So I mean, there is that, but it's still like
So-
there's this whole idea of like blood shall never be spilt in the sacred ground of the church. I mean, this isn't the first movie that's shown people getting killed in a church, but like it does it with complete disregard for any viewer safety. I mean, it is a very violent action sequence, and it's quite long too. It's like. It's a good 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of him just killing people.
Yeah, well, like, it's sort of filmed in a sense, and I think even the soundtrack is sort of, like, I haven't been able to rewatch it, but I remember just sort of through the visual and audio sort of elements, it felt like the director was almost sort of sticking his tongue out at the audience, sort of like his hand on his nose, being like, na 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 na. Whereas basically just saying, look at the stuff that I can do, and...
Or look at the stuff Colin Firth can do.
that too. And it's, like, he basically, there's some things like he puts a shovel or something through someone's neck.
Yeah, he does
and
that.
he...
Which I'd clearly only ever seen done to zombies in movies before, so
Yeah.
props to him. Like I said, he goes there.
Yeah.
Matthew Vaughn is not afraid.
And, like, I guess sort of has narrative relevance. And, yeah, I mean, some people I'm sure enjoy it. For me, it's just sort of, okay.
It's an enjoyable scene. I mean, it's violent and crazy and very slickly directed and edited. Like, there's lots of crazy things going on, and the camera's very... It's hard to even
Kinetic.
describe. Yeah, it's very kinetic. That's a good word. It's always in motion. I don't even think there's actually that many... proposed cuts in that action sequence. I don't remember that many.
At least they film it as...
Yes, they film it to make it seamless, yes.
Yeah, so... yeah, I imagine they probably cut away through switch pans or something like that, because it was a very long sequence.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody would hurt themselves if it was sort of a longer.
Oh yeah, of course,
sequence.
It's definitely edited. But I mean, it just feels very fluid. Like it's not. I don't see a lot of action sequences like that. A lot of movies these days, you watch the Taken movies and stuff, and they have very quick cuts. I mean, some of the cuts don't even last for a second. They're just lightning pace, and you can't tell what is going on. It's it's that whole shaky cam mentality. I think only Paul Greengrass really does it that well. But anyway, that's besides the point. But it's just these are well filmed action sequences. They're interesting.
Yeah, and so it was a decent sort of element to it. Do we want to briefly touch on the whole idea of the SIM cards? I guess okay.
I don't know what you want to bring up there. I mean, go ahead.
I guess the very brief thing I want to say about it is that it just, I strongly believe that it's the responsibility of the director and the writer to, even in action films, and maybe even especially, to have no sort of elements that stick out, or story moments where people are just sort of questioning or are a little bit confused by it, or basically essentially drawn out by it, because you're telling me that nobody's going, that's weird. Somebody's handing out basically billions and billions of dollars of free product for free forever. Having those things in any movie, at least for me, pulls me out and makes me question the sort of intelligence of the characters. I don't care sort of what Sam Jack does to sort of release his angry, aggressive
pheromone thing.
Yeah, whatever it is. I don't care if it's maybe it's when people pick up the phone. I don't really care, but it's the fact that they picked an element that seems ridiculous, and that seems that normally sort of just a normal someone that they're not even that particularly intelligent can go, this seems a little bit weird, right? It's just they could have picked anything else. They could have picked something that was not such a huge sort of sore thumb kind of
I don't even think
idea.
it's that. I think they just need to give Sam Jackson a reason to be doing it. Like, how would he profit from it? And I'm sure you can write a way that he will make a profit off of giving free service, like through microtransactions, which are so prominent today, or advertising, or all sorts of things. Like, there's a number of ways that you could do that. So, I mean, it's not even that element. It's just, I mean, I know what you get there. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, I know it's a little insulting to the intelligence sometimes, but it's like, it just really isn't the type of movie where you ask those questions. I mean, it's a ridiculous plot to begin with. It's just all about, it just hinges on the ridiculous nature of everything.
Yeah, but see, the problem is, like, with this film, it sort of kind of goes back and forth, to be honest. And like,
it's got a duality,
Right, and I guess it's just, I feel like you don't even need people like me to be questioning that if you just sort of shore up it a little bit, like, legitimately, all you have to do is like, so I'm like, but Sam Jack, how would you make money off this, or why are you giving so much money away? Good question. I'm doing this because I will, blah blah blah, advertising, whatever you said.
2 lines of dialogue, done.
It's like in that one sequence in like Thank You for Smoking, where they're like talking about like, where they talk about like, well, how can one of the characters like talking to another one, and they're basically trying to get smoking back into films. Like, they talk about space, and this one character's like, it doesn't matter that, you theoretically can't smoke in space. They'll write a line. Thank God for the, the smoking in space screen.
Yeah.
And like, oh, yes. Like, legitimately, that's all they had to do in this film.
Yeah.
And then it would have fixed it, right? And it's just, I guess that's why I'm sort of getting not a little bit agitated, just because it seems something fairly easy, and it could really sort of polish the film, right? Because I do think there's some interesting elements to this film, but it's just a lot of these sort of continuous small problems that sort of make it ultimately quite average and like forgettable.
Something I want to applaud is the comedy is quite good in this movie. I found myself laughing quite a bit. In fact, more than some comedies, which is a little bit sad. But I mean, like I think most of the comedy, I mean, aside from Sam Jackson and his funny lisp, which is quite funny. Most of it comes from, I would say, Taron Egerton and Colin Firth. They have an interesting chemistry, and I think they're quite funny together. Just simple scenes too, like when he enters the Kingsman and they're going down that elevator, and Colin Firth is giving this sort of like anecdotal type of explanation, everything, and Taron Egerton just looks up. He's like, "How fucking far does this thing go?" It's like, it's funny. It's he brings that sort of street attitude into a very gentlemanly role, what you normally associate with the James Bond being very professional and having a tie. So I mean, it's quite funny, and I think they do a good job throughout the movie. Another scene that really stood out for me was the dinner scene. I thought that was hilarious. Like, the gazelle, the woman with the bladed legs, starts wheeling out this cart which is closed, and the camera and the music kind of give this ominous feel to it, like, oh, is someone's head in there or something? And she rolls it up, she opens it, and it's Happy Meals. I mean, it's hilarious. And the best part is how Colin Firth just kind of adapts to that. He just goes along with, try this wine with the with this burger, and it's very funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But I actually do wish it took itself a little more seriously towards the end, because I think I felt this way about Kick-Ass as well. I think they just get a little too over the top and silly by the end. It's like, it's a big kind of parody of spy movies, but then it kind of just falls into the same trappings by the end. You got this crazy, world domination thing going on, and then you have, the few heroes who can stop it, and they're in this really silly looking lair. I mean, the set design on that looked ridiculous. It's like this foamy looking rock walls everywhere, and it looks like something you'd see in like Dr. Evil's lair or something. Like, it's very cheesy. And I just think it goes a little too far here. Like, I just wasn't that entertained anymore. It wasn't sticking to what worked, which was the wit, which was the raw visual, punch to everything. And they did silly things like they sent out
her name's Roxy.
Roxy, yes. So that is her name. She becomes Lancelot, the new Lancelot. They did a really silly thing with, they kind of just wrote her out of the movie basically, where they're like,
which is really stupid.
I know.
She could have been a very interesting character. Like, they set her up for that.
In Kick-Ass, Kick-Ass himself, you could argue that he is the sidekick. But the interesting thing is, Hit Girl was a very interesting character. She's very funny, very cool, very off the beaten path type character. And I was hoping they would do something like that with Roxy. They didn't really. She wasn't really in it even that much. She's kind of just a potential I don't want to say love interest, but she's always there to stick up for the main character when everybody else is kind of rooting him down. She's that character. And they don't even give her, like, a cool finale. Like, she could have joined Eggsy in trying to stop Sam Jackson. They could have been fighting side by side to see that teamwork they're always talking about in these training sessions. We could see that happen, but instead, they send her on some lame mission to float into the outer atmosphere and fire a missile at a satellite. And I mean, it just feels so pointless. Like, this whole plot line felt really silly.
I feel like perhaps what they're trying to do is, like, because they made this whole thing about her being, exceptional at all these tasks and all this sort of stuff.
She's afraid of heights.
Yeah, but the thing is like, okay, if
it
you
doesn't
really
have a payoff.
Exactly, that's the problem. It's like, if you really want to go down this route and sort of make her like the strong, independent female, that sort of thing, make her mission
a little more interesting.
Yeah, like, she legitimately, like, okay, I get that she's afraid, but, like, even on the way down, it's just like, I know that they're not gonna just let her fall and hit the ground and die.
Absolutely. Nothing in that mission even revolves around her skills.
Yeah.
She's literally just relying on a piece of technology to shoot another piece of technology, and then rely on her parachute to come out before she hits the ground. That's it. Like, there's nothing that's that interesting going on there. And the movie constantly has that, like, it flashes back and forth like Nolan style between several plot lines to try and make it really intense, that intercutting. But I just, like, it's just such a dumb scenario that I just wasn't that entertained by it. Like, I would much rather see her down there with Eggsy just fighting and, doing
blowing stuff up.
Yeah, doing God's work, to the enemies, I wanted to see that, and I was disappointed I didn't, so.
Yeah, I guess that's a pretty good segue into sort of the last fight. And I think what we just said sort of about Roxy's sort of last mission can kind of sort of attribute or apply to the last fight, where it just sort of defaults to sort of a safe, not boring, but just a very safe.
I think it's boring.
Okay,
it's fairly boring compared to things like the church fight. That was like very, like you said, kinetic, very high energy. And then we just get to this kind of rudimentary one-on-one, kind of. It was boring. I thought.
And it's like they set up this this Rocky to be very good at blade legging or whatever you want to call it, like using her weapons and
turning people into sushi.
Yeah, exactly, right? And the fight is pretty quick. There's nothing super interesting. I thought they set up a very interesting element where they give Eggsy the small little blade that has a bunch of like this neurotoxin or something on it that will make people melt into this weird color, whatever. But it's sort of like the last moment where they're in the air and he like pulls out and everything. I think I would almost be more interested if he pulls that out right away.
Yeah, and they have like a bit of a leg fight.
Yeah, right. It's just.
The action scene doesn't do any of the things that the movie does well. It's not funny, and it's not even that violent. And those are the two things that this movie is going for. Like, it's funny and ridiculously over-the-top violent at the same time. And I think that's what makes those action scenes work for the majority of the movie. And this one just kind of like a rudimentary kind of martial arts fight. They just start punching, kicking. There's nothing that visceral in it, You look at movies like The Raid, like any one-on-one scenarios there are extremely brutal and satisfying to watch. This movie just didn't have that there. And, especially it came after the hilarious scene where people's heads are exploding to the music. I mean, that was pretty funny and a visual trip. I mean, it was very strange to see and quite funny, so...
Yeah, and I believe I actually said it in the review, but I always say, I did say that I tend to be less sort of intrigued by action sequences generally, because I know, for the most part, like, when Roxy's plummeting to the earth, I know they're not just gonna like flatten her and make her die and everything. So often it feels like there's very little stakes, and so in order for action sequences and like fight sequences where it's like one-on-one to be interesting to me anyways, needs to have a particular element, either like The Raid where it's just two people that are very, very good at it, and it's just
great fight choreography in general,
right? Yeah, like where it's just beautiful choreography, essentially that, which is super, super difficult. I mean, like, they did The Raid purely based on that because it's so much work.
Oh yeah, it is.
Right?
And you need action stars who can do that. So.
Exactly, right? So you either do that, or you have some sort of element that puts a new flavor into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the final fight in this movie, which is, it's a, like, I'm kind of slamming it through most of this discussion, but, like, it was a good film and I enjoyed it, but the last fight sort of signified what I usually have an issue with most action sequences. It's like, either the fight's very, like, okay, I know that the good guy's gonna win, after being beaten up a bunch of times, or, in like a gunfight, people just start shooting randomly, maybe someone gets shot, but in the end, the good guy wins, and people are just hiding, like, firing loud noises, right? So I just wish there was some sort of new element that they put in, and I thought they did it fairly well. They had the church, and then training sequences. They didn't really have fight sequences. They used a sudden drowning cage and all that sort of stuff. So they did fairly well in finding new ways of sort of creating action. And then right at sort of the key moment, the moment when you should have it to the utmost potential that you have, they defaulted to a very boring fighting sequence.
I think it's just one of those things, you always go back to it, is it just kind of blew its load too early. Like, I've seen that in multiple movies, like I remember watching, like, The Wolverine, that,
which,
was
of
it
the
recent?
well,
yeah, it was the most recent one. There was a scene on a bullet train, which was excellent. It was a really great fighting sequence, and unfortunately, it happened halfway through the movie. So the ending fighting sequence was nowhere near as entertaining as that. So you're kind of like let down a bit, right? Because the only way you can go from there is to up the ante, right? But it's just not that cool. So.
Yeah. Well, this is a film that we saw together. Fury does the same thing as well with tank battles.
Yes, absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So it's
it's one of those things
Hollywood,
where it's like,
please.
yeah, you got to save that climactic battle and make sure it has an interesting element to it. Even great movies like Captain America: The Winter Soldier had like a bit of a floppy kind of ending because like we'd already seen Captain America fight the Winter Soldier, so for them just to get in another fist fight with no interesting element to it, it's kind of like, all right, we've already been here. Is this like part 2 of the midway fight scene? So
yeah, it's I mean, if we think about it legitimately, the climactic moment is our protagonist throwing a blade leg into an antagonist.
Which is a little funny, but
it's a little bit funny, but like I'm a firm believer that your climax should be like, for me, like I believe like it should be the ending moment of your film. We'll get into discussion about that later. Nathan and I sort of sometimes disagree a little bit about that. But yeah, like even then, it's just.
We don't disagree. You're just wrong.
So we hope to have actually some discussions about that, like what constitutes good acting, and what like whether a climax should what it should have and that sort of stuff. So hopefully it'll be interesting. But going back to this film, like legitimately, the film instead ends on, which is admittedly it's funny, but it's our protagonist going to have sex with a princess that he frees.
Oh yes, that.
Right, and it's just like...
I think, with the rise of feminism, I think a lot of people are going to take that scene a little too seriously.
Yeah.
It's a silly gag. That's all it really is.
And, like, I'm not particularly offended by it. I just thought, like, you could have done something narratively a little more. Like, okay, great, sure, it's an action film, but... I don't know, I just always think, even in action films, you should always strive to do something interesting narratively, and that's basically just, like, being like, I don't care.
It kind of just tried to end on a cheap joke.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Which was a little bit disappointing, but
yeah. But I mean, overall, it's still an entertaining movie. I think it's a good, popcorn movie. That's what it's made to be, and I think, for the most part, it accomplishes it. I think these movies can exist and sort of transcend that and become an actual good movie. I don't think this movie quite does that. I think it's an entertaining movie, and that's kind of where you draw the line. It's funny, it's got good acting, there's some really great action sequences, and that's about it. At the end of the year, you won't really remember it too fondly, but it's still enjoyable while it lasts.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of in the mindset that there are already so many films that are basically just action films that have neat action and, mediocre story, mediocre action sequences and all that sort of stuff, that at this point, if you make an action film, unless you're doing The Raid, which is just sort of, physical poetry in motion, I feel like if you're going to make an action film, it's got to have something narratively interesting or something. Otherwise, I don't understand when you're making it.
Yeah. As it stands, it's kind of just like digestible pulp.
Yeah. So, anyways, I still enjoyed it. It was something I didn't go, oh goddamn, I lost 2 hours. But that's all I got to say about it. Do you have anything?
No, I think that's about it. So, yeah, I mean, It's an enjoyable movie. I mean, hopefully you guys liked it. If you didn't, or you liked it more than we did, please comment. Tell us why we're wrong. All that stuff.
Don't worry, you won't be the first person to tell me I'm wrong. Nathan tells me all the time.
Most people tell him that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Anyways, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you.